Hello, it's Anna Pacheco, SantaFe101.com. My guest today is Charlie McGarity, and he is with PPC Solar up in Taos. Charlie, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, I want to just personally thank Patrick O'Brien because he referred me over to you. And I understand that you two have been friends since the second grade. And he actually followed you out to Taos from, I think, Michigan, right? So tell me a little bit about this long and this incredibly long friendship and how I bet you're almost like a mentor to him, I think he said. So tell me a little bit about that before we get started.
Well, I would say that the mentorship is mutual. We've kind of guided each other through just through growing up from childhood to adults, and yeah, it's been a long and interesting friendship. And when I was born and raised in Mexico City, and then moved to Michigan, and so found myself in second grade, not knowing anybody, and Patrick was one of the first kids I met, and we've been friends ever since.
And so you were born in Mexico City. Was your father in some type of an international industry that moved you guys around, or your family, or what happened there?
Yeah, he was with Ford Motor Company, and Ford is a multinational company, and we moved a few times over the years, and ended up living in Brazil as well as Mexico.
And do you speak Spanish or Portuguese?
I speak fluent Spanish, and my Portuguese is not even conversational, but I can sort of lumber through and put things together.
Oh, good. So let's fast forward to you. You moved to Taos. Were you a hippie? Back in the day, everybody was kind of a hippie and, kind of whatever, they were just like getting out of the mainstream and coming to New Mexico. Did you have long hair? Were you a hippie and that's what got you to Taos, or what brought you to our neck of the woods?
That's a great question that really speaks to the nature of Taos. And, my sort of wave of immigrants to Taos was very different. And it was more about, I would say a couple of things. One is just natural beauty, like finding a place where I can be up in the mountains and down at the river, and just always out exploring our beautiful wilderness. And on the other hand, it was a time of a lot of experimentation, wanting to know about alternative building and alternative energy, sustainable practices, natural building, all these kinds of things. And this was a place where there was a lot of freedom to explore. So that was.
Were you already working in this industry back in Michigan then? I mean, you had this background back home?
So I actually had moved back to Mexico and had lived like 7 years in Mexico as an adult. So I was working in with a nonprofit, like a group of indigenous villages down there. And so my work was very much kind of like rural development and social, organizing and orchestrating for community projects and things. But at the same time, my real focus was like their, sustainability initiatives, potable water systems, all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, that was the interest that lined right up with, with the natural building for me.
And are you schooled in construction or building, or is it just, you just learned as you went along?
I went to the School of Hard Knocks, and no, I learned as I went along. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so let's talk about, so you're with PPC Solar. Let's talk about the company you've been with for many years, and the different things the company does up in Taos or in New Mexico, or let us know how big you are.
So PPC Solar is actually has been around for over 40 years now. As far as our research shows, that's the oldest solar installer in the country.
And what does PPC stand for?
It's Paradise Power Company.
Okay.
And that's our true name, is Paradise Power Company. And that's the PPC, which is our DBA. And yeah, it began going back to the hippie things, like the communes up north of Taos, and a guy by the name of Mika Weinman started, as soon as really like solar panels and solar equipment was hitting the market, he was an electrical engineer and started putting together systems for neighbors and up around the Llama Foundation here. And then that just grew steadily. And then his son took over the business. And then it really moved into a whole new era of, grid connected solar. And then that moved into like commercial and utility solar installations. So as a company, we now do everything from little kind of cabin systems all the way up to utility scale power plants.
And what is off-grid storage? I saw that on your website.
So off-grid systems are not connected to the electric utility. So they're completely independent. They operate on the solar power they produce and the batteries where they store it. And they have what's called an inverter to create regular household AC power, so they can plug in, refrigerators, laptops, lights, that kind of stuff. And then a grid tie system is the home or building has a regular electric meter, and they have a solar system which is sort of backfeeds into the grid when it has excess power. So storage is a more kind of modern term which refers to storing energy. So whether it's off-grid or on-grid, it's taking the renewable energy which is stored, and they're produced, and storing it for later. So for example, my daytime electric production, I'm storing in batteries for nighttime. Or with a grid tie system, I might store it for a grid outage, or simply store it. So instead of sending it back to the grid to kind of run the meter backward, I just store it on site and use it at night. And then the grid is like backup power.
And then what type of batteries are required for this to store, to absorb this solar energy?
There are a few different kinds of batteries. If you're off grid, there's a really wide selection, from flooded lead acid, like a car battery, to sealed lead batteries, and on up to lithium batteries, which are now coming into like a competitive price realm. And they're really long lasting, super deep cycle, much smaller. So that's kind of like the new thing. But those are typically lower voltage, like 12, 24, 48 volt batteries. Whereas when we move to grid tied systems that have energy storage, those are more like a medium voltage battery. They might hover around, 300 to 400 volts, and but still storing DC power.
So you've come a long way, I guess, back in the hippie days. I mean, maybe like there was one or two people said, "Hey, yeah, man, I want to have all my energy from the sun." And now I'm assuming you do commercial, you work commercially with companies that now say, I want to get my energy, from solar, and I don't want to be so dependent on the regular, grid and that type of thing. Tell me a little bit about how that kind of evolved and where you're at with it now. It sounds from your website that it sounds like mainstream stuff now.
It really is, Anna. And, especially with commercial stuff, like small businesses, even large businesses, the cost of the solar installations has come down. And then there are federal and state income tax credits. And for rural businesses that meet the SBA Small Business Administration standard of a small rural business, there are USDA grants that'll reimburse them for like 25% of the cost of their installation. So when you put all those incentives together and there's no sales tax, a small business can install solar at such a low cost that it's substantially cheaper for them than paying their electric bill. So it'll usually pay for itself in under 5 years. So they have this upfront capital investment, But then the solar array has tremendous longevity. They last, I mean, the warranty alone is 25 years. So then they last well beyond that. So it's just a great investment, but at the same time, more and more people want to be sustainable. And it's one of these few really concrete actions that you can take and say, what do I do in my life to make my existence here, my footprint, more sustainable? And that's one of them right there. It's like, okay, we're going to provide our electricity from a renewable, clean, local source rather than some distant carbon-fed polluting source. And
is the government allowing these grants or these incentives because they're trying to limit or lessen the carbon footprint? Is that why the government's doing it?
yes, I think they're encouraging the use of renewable energy, and the businesses that take advantage of those incentives are also de facto leaders in their community, because they are the businesses that show the way to other people for how you get to economically viable sustainability.
And then these big solar panels, I noticed here in Santa Fe, the Genoveva Chavez Recreational Center, it's the city's biggest sport complex. About 3 or 4 years ago, they put these huge panels in the parking lot. So I guess, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I guess they're getting their energy from that now. Where are these panels, these mechanisms that are needed for solar energy, where are they constructed or built?
Well, that we call those solar parking canopies, and mostly the actual steel structure is going to be American made, and then the solar panels themselves, they tend to be like multinationally produced. So like somebody will make the frame, someone will make the glass, someone makes the cells, and they're assembled in another country. So they go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so then what are they made up of? You just mentioned cells. What makes them be able to save this energy from the sun? What is it composed of? Pardon my ignorance.
No, that's a great question. It's a silicone crystalline cell that essentially just when the sun hits it, it separates the positive and negative ions. They sort of move away from each other, and each is drawn to a little electrode that runs through this crystalline wafer, and then so one of those electrodes is negative and the other's positive, and that simply creates DC electrical current. So each solar panel will have typically like 72 of those cells, and these electrodes that like a wire that just runs through them. It's a conductor, and then that gathers all that electricity and then runs it down a series of cells, and at the end of the panel they all come together as like a single power output that's really substantial. It's, these panels now have like 4, 5, even 600 watts for a single panel.
And where did this industry begin? Was it here in this country or was it in Germany? Where did it start?
I feel like there was a Frenchman involved in there, but it's been like a lot of sciences. When science is developing, it's often shared, it's published, and people from all different parts of the country, world, are all kind of like working on things to try to advance it. So there was a couple of people who figured out the actual, the separating of the electrical ions like that. But then it took, a number of decades to move that into an actual viable solar panel. And that's really a multinational effort.
like as they say, great minds think alike. So simultaneously, a lot of it, kind of like with this COVID vaccine, several different companies are working on it at the same time. So something similar.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Mhm.
places like, we're very fortunate in New Mexico. We have 330 days a year at least of sunshine. So we're in the Sun Belt. So, does this type of solar energy, does it benefit, like say the Northeast where they get a lot of snow and different, their weather's not as nice as ours? Can other types of climates benefit or not as much as the ones that get a lot of sunshine?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They do benefit. In fact, a few years ago, one of the biggest solar installing states in this country was New Jersey. And, each solar panel would produce a little bit less power per year. But even so, they were still producing power. And with a large amount of installations, they were producing a lot of renewable energy. And so who installs or doesn't install solar is not so much dependent on the location and how much annual sunshine there is as political will. So in New Jersey, they set up a lot of incentives. They made it easy to jump through the hoops. The utilities were supportive of it. And so yeah, the renewable energy business really took off.
And would you say that, well, I'm assuming because you're up in Taos, that Taos is one of the leading cities in New Mexico that proponents of solar, or do you have your counterparts all over the state these days?
Well, it's kind of the same thing. So Taos is leading in the sense that we have a huge off-grid community, for one. So there are a lot of people who don't have the electric meters, but their homes run on solar, like the Earthship communities. Um, but also, like I say, our company, Paradise Power, PPC Solar, has been here for over 40 years, installing huge amounts of solar. And more recently, our local electric cooperative has taken initiative to install a lot of utility scale arrays spread throughout the county to provide renewable energy, countywide. There are other parts of the state that are really doing a lot of solar. Las Cruces is one of them. And there again, we find that down there, they made decisions to facilitate solar installation, make it easier to apply for permits, to get projects approved and that kind of thing. And therefore, Las Cruces became one of the biggest solar installing areas. So there are a lot of, political will plays a big part in who goes solar.
And everything. So what would be the cost? Like say, I just live in a regular neighborhood in Santa Fe, but I decided, I'm going to get solar. I'm not going to pay that electric bill anymore. What would like an approximate cost? If I rang up a company and said, I want my main source of energy to come from the sun. What would that cost, like an average person who already lives in a home, not a brand new home or anything that was constructed as it went up, it all came together?
Sure. Well, I'll answer that in two ways. So the first one is that one of the biggest revolutions in the solar industry is not like how much power they get from a solar panel, it's solar financing. And essentially they've made it so easy because it's such like a known financially successful model to install solar that solar loans are structured around the tax credits and things. And basically the answer is that you can typically get solar with no money down, finance it, and your monthly payment will be lower than your average electric bill. So it's cheaper to go solar than to not go solar.
But
So
in terms, would it be $10,000, $5,000? What would it be?
yeah, so right. And then that's the other question is like, okay, if I'm just buying it outright and I don't want to finance, then it depends exactly on how much power your home uses. So the more like the size of the solar array is designed to fully offset your annual electrical usage. So the more you use, the bigger your solar array is. but average, I would say it's probably around like 16 to 20,000 a year. I mean, 16 to 20,000 for a system.
Okay, so that would take a good 10 years maybe to get your money back, don't you think, for a typical household, not a business?
A little bit less. I would say these days, if it's mounted on the roof, it's going to be like 8 or 9.
Okay, that's good to know. And then I saw from your
Setting.
website, what is photovoltaic? What is that?
Ah, well, that is that process that I was describing in a solar cell. In the trade, we call it PV. PV, it's called the PV industry. And photo is light and voltaic is electric. So it's light, electricity from sunlight. And that's that process where the sun shines on silicone crystalline wafer and separates out into electricity, positively.
Okay. And then I also noticed that you also have charging stations for electric cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is like a really exciting new thing. The electric vehicles is one of these huge transformations that's already begun. Like we've all grown up on internal combustion, gas, diesel engines, and that is getting phased out really, really quickly. So as people move to electric vehicles, it seems like a really sustainable, clean thing. However, if their electricity is coming from a coal-fired power plant, then it's not really clean.
It defeats the purpose.
Exactly. So what we're doing is we're coupling it with clean, renewable solar energy, and then that's like really the home run.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, you're mentioning about politics. You and I, we're probably close in age. In the 1970s, we could have had electric cars, but the oil and gas industry or whoever was behind all this, they put a stop to it. So we could have had this 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think things are starting to change and maybe it will happen. So that does make sense that, it's kind of, if you're having to get your electricity from this, that it's continuing to hurt, affect climate change and things, then it's not really that helpful. So good. So you basically, we're out of time, of course, because I knew this was gonna be an interesting interview. So if anybody's watching this, people are thinking of moving to New Mexico. I mean, I've got a bunch of great interviews up in Taos. What would you recommend to people, like, if they're going to buy a house? I mean, if they're building, they're starting from scratch. Of course, you probably would say, start with solar right away, right off the bat. If somebody's coming into New Mexico, would you say, and they're buying a house, would you still say, if you can afford it, you really should try and be self-sustaining?
Sure. Solar is easily retrofitted to pretty much any home, nearly any home, or business for that matter. And yeah, like I say, it's a super concrete, economically viable way to move towards sustainability. And when you look at the solar maps, like how much solar energy we get here in New Mexico, it's comparable to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia. These deserts. We just get a lot of sun, which means that every panel we put up is really maximized. And yeah, we're really blessed. It's a great place to go to be renewable.
Well, I remember when I was like in the 70s, that was kind of the hippie era. I was kind of a hippie back then too. And that was the thing. Everybody was doing solar and that was kind of cool. But I'll just mention this last thing. Somebody's watching this because you probably moved here. So when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s here, Santa Fe, Taos, and Boulder were known as the three cities of cosmic consciousness. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but I love that. And I think that might still be kind of accurate.
Well, I don't know. This is going to sound kind of, today, Santa Fe, Taos, and Boulder are the three sister cities of corporate consciousness, but that's just me. But anyway, there was this kind of hippie era, but there's still, Taos to me is kind of like Santa Fe was in the 60s and 70s. When I go up there, I just feel like it's very nostalgic for me. Is there anything you want to end with? Of course, I'm going to have all your contact details, information on your company. I loved going to your website. I just learned some interesting little tidbits from that. Anything you want to end with, sir?
Well, I would just say, that the solar energy industry is really evolving, and, we're moving to where each home, business, any place where we install solar is like energy ecosystem that you can really manage and optimize. You know, you can do things like charge your electric vehicle and put it on a setting that says 100% from solar. So it's all just going to go, like, when you have excess sunshine, boom, it goes right into your car. You know, so it's just like, it's really all moving in a direction that's on the one hand, it's kind of high tech, but on the other hand, it's all like at your fingertips, a phone app, you know, in your hand, and you can manage it and really live. It's where we used to live in, we do, you know, natural plasters and, you know, hand-built homes. And this is like this extension of that, where it's still this really natural process and environmentally conscious, but it's also really high tech. And so it's kind of a beautiful thing to watch those come together.
Well, most definitely, New Mexico has an abundance of sunshine. Do you service? Are you work? Does PPC work throughout the state, or are you just centered in the Taos area?
Both New Mexico and Colorado. We kind of mostly focus like on southern Colorado, but yeah, definitely both, like
You do
state.
projects in Santa Fe or Albuquerque, or
Oh,
do you
yeah,
move around?
in fact, we have an Albuquerque office, and we've been doing huge amounts of work for the city of Albuquerque, both EV charging and solarization, those big solar parking canopies. Yeah, we're doing lots of work throughout the state.
Well, good. Well, then I'll be sure and put all that information on the site. I want to thank you again, and you take care.
Thanks, Anna. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.